Welcome everyone to this Open Access webinar from Cambridge University Press on Open Access. Today we're going to cover the basics of what Open Access is, why it has developed as such a significant means of disseminating research, what your options are at Cambridge, how your decision might be affected by your funder policy or your institution's arrangement with Cambridge, and how Open Access monographs work at Cambridge. I am Caroline Black, Publishing Director for our Science and Maths journals. Our speakers will be Fiona Hutton and Daniel Pearce, who will focus on open access, particularly in journals, with Fiona representing our Science and Maths journals and Daniel our Humanities and Social Sciences journals. Then Helen Barton from our books team will discuss open access monographs at Cambridge. The slides will be made available to you, all of you, after the webinar. As we have a large audience, you have all been muted. Please use the chat function for any questions and we'll respond to as many as we can at the end of the presentations. Do start posing your questions while the speakers are presenting. The speakers will be joined for questions by Liz Friend-Smith, who will join Helen in taking questions about monographs, and Andrew Sykes, who can take questions on how we are working with libraries and institutions to facilitate open access publishing. So now let me hand over to Fiona to start the presentation.
Hello, I'm going to give you a small introduction to who we are. So Cambridge University Press is the world's oldest publisher, founded in 1534. And in 1534, Cambridge was granted a letters patent to print all manner of books by Henry VIII. We're a department of the University of Cambridge, and we have offices in more than 50 countries, trading in over 200. Now, Cambridge University Press is one of a number of publishers that has a focus on publishing academic content, but there are 10,000 journal publishers globally, of which around 5,000 are included in indexes such as Scopus. So I'm going to take you through the most important aspects of open access and some of the main motivations behind it. So what is open access? Knowledge is defined as open if anyone is free to access, use, modify, and share it. The open access movement was motivated by the birth of the internet and solidified through 3 declarations, the first being the Budapest Open Access Initiative, which I've described here in the slide. This declaration was announced after 2001, in which 34,000 scholars around the world, and I was one of them, signed an open letter to scientific publishers calling for the establishment of an online public library that would provide the full content of the published record of research and scholarly discourse in medicine and the life sciences in a freely accessible, fully searchable, interlinked form. Scientists signing the letter also pledged not to publish in or peer review or non-open access journals. This led to the establishment of the Public Library of Science and also the publisher Biomed Central. PLOS journals launched in 2003, but the dial really changed when PLOS launched PLOS One in 2006, and the growth of open access really began in earnest. Now, for those who are interested in the birth of OA, there's a really interesting history outlined on wiki pages, but also I would advise you to visit Peter Suber's pages for more information. So what types of gold open access are there? They're generally referred to gold open access and green open access. These are the 2 most common types, and they have different diversions. For gold open access, you see free public access to published articles and immediate access to those articles. However, for green open access, it tends to be published in subscription journals where the copyright remains with the publisher, although not in all cases. And but there's free public access to a version of the article, for example, in a repository. Some publishers require an embargo period, but not all publishers and not for all types of articles. So it's very important to check journal guidelines about what the green open access policies are for those particular titles. Use of gold open access is determined by the type of user language, user license, for example, a CC BY ND license. I will go on to talk about that in a little minute, but please check your journal about what license it gives for the articles that we publish there. For green open access, authors have the right to use articles for a range of purposes. There are sometimes open versions of the article, but they tend to have a restrictive license. For gold open access, there is sometimes a fee, but this is not always necessary. But commonly, you will see an APC, which is called an article processing charge, and this is paid by the author or on their behalf, by their funder, for example. With green open access, there's generally no fee because obviously the publisher is getting costs reimbursed through subscription prices. So gold open access is really defined by access and reuse, bearing in mind, of course, that the APC is not always a requirement. So how is this different from free access? Free access does not have reuse, modifying, or sharing allowed. Whereas you might also hear platinum or diamond open access. This is where there's no fees from authors, but articles are published under an open license, and the APC is paid by the funder, institution, or society. You also might hear the term bronze, which is free to read without an open license. So gold open access articles are generally published under Creative Commons licenses. So you'll see the CC indication on the start of these licenses, but there's a number of different types of license. There's CC BY, which is the most open license, where licensees may copy, distribute, display and perform the work and make derivative works and remixes based on it. There's the share alike license, where licensees may distribute derivative works under a license identical to the license that governs the original work. There's non-commercial licenses, where authors may copy, distribute, display and perform the work and make derivative works and remixes based on it for non-commercial purposes. And there's non-derivative works as well. So I would encourage you to go to the Creative Commons licenses page to see more details of that. So what are the motivations for open access? Motivations for open access include enhanced access and interrogation of data, and therefore there would be an accelerated return on the public's investment in research, therefore advancing the scientific process. Discoverability and dissemination. Open access articles have been shown to receive 18% more citations than average, and we can see from our own data that they tend to have much more usage than the average. It democratizes access across all institutions, regardless of size or budget. Previously, a researcher could only access content their library was able to afford, depending if they could afford the subscription or not. It provides previously unattainable access to community colleges, two-year colleges, K-12 and other schools that were unable to afford the subscription prices. And also some stakeholders hope that it would reduce the costs, profits of publishers and force publishers to become more open. So what are the key market drivers? There's obviously funder policies. We're going to explain a little bit more in detail on that later, as funder policies such as Plan S. There's big deals, negotiations, and read and publish deals, and open access is a core element of that. Again, we're going to talk about that in a little more detail. There's growth of open access in different subject areas. And this is particularly highly relevant to communities such as in public health, where access to information is really crucial, and really crucial immediately. Authors can share work easily and without restriction with a wider audience. There's also a range of change in attitudes within academic societies towards open access. And they see open access as a way of disseminating content widely, which is a shared goal with many societies. There's innovation in different types of publishing outputs, and this has led to expansive growth in Gold Open Access. And there's also a call for access to publicly funded research, and especially in subjects like climate or the big global challenges. So there's more people wanting to access that content. So there has been massive growth in Gold Open Access, particularly since 2006, when PLOS One was established. In 2018, there is now an estimated 2.1 million subscription, but 0.5 million open access articles published worldwide. So that means that open access represents around 20% of the total amount of articles produced. So what about Cambridge University Press? Where can authors publish open access? So we have a range of options for authors publishing open access in our journals. We currently have 35 Gold Open Access titles, and this is expanding rapidly. We've got a number of journals that are launching. And we've also got 335 hybrid journals, hybrid meaning that the author can publish Gold Open Access as an option by paying an article processing charge. So we have many options to publish Gold Open Access with Cambridge. So how would you choose which open access option to go down? You have to ask yourself, does green satisfy, or do you need gold? And if so, you likely have the choice between Gold Open Access and hybrid journals, though this may of course change in the future. Your first step is to read the instructions for authors and determine how the open access option is made available or paid for. Then you have to choose the right license. Does your funder require a particular copyright clearance license? Does it require that copyright be retained? Again, you need to check with your funder and check against the journal guidelines and what kind of license is being offered. Who pays your APC? Can you pay it directly from your grant funds, someone else, through an institution or consortium, or through an RMP deal? We'll come on to RMP deals later. And how can you promote your Gold Open Access article? The best part about open access is the availability, so it's very important for authors to make use of that availability. So as the last slide from me, I'm just going to talk a little bit about open research. Now, this is a term that is being used increasingly. Sometimes it's interchanged with open science, but for the purposes of all scholarly communication, we talk about it as open research. So the open research movement seeks to maximize the impact and benefits of research by prioritizing barrier-free access to research data and methodologies. So we tend to think this internally as pre-publication, publication, and post-publication. So for pre-publication, we're thinking about grant awards, collaborative working tools, registration of clinical trials, things like preprint servers or other forms of early publications, and infrastructure for hosting and sharing data. In terms of publication, open access is part of this open research movement, but it's only one pillar of that movement. We're also referring to transparent peer review, metadata, open data and data linking, open citations, negative and null findings. And then if you think of post-publication, you're talking about post-publication peer review and commenting, impact assessment, preservation, and open resources.
Great, thank you very much, Fiona. Before I start, let me just remind everybody listening that if you have questions, please do put them in the chat box, and we'll try to get to them at the end. My part of the presentation today is going to be focused on this question posed from the perspective of an author. Should I publish open access? And we trust it's going to become a question that is going to be increasingly relevant for you as people who are engaged in academic research, as authors, as you choose to publish your work. But it's not a simple question to answer. That The options that are available to you as individuals with respect to open access will depend upon a confluence of lots of different factors. Where are you publishing? Which journal are you publishing in? What's that journal's policy? Who funds your research or your institution or your lab? What's their policy, and to what extent does it align with the policy of the journal? And what is your institution's policy, and what funding might be available through your institution? And what kind of agreement might your institution have with the publisher of the journal that you're choosing to publish in? It is a complex landscape, and I think that every stakeholder who's involved in the development of open access and the introduction of open access, be that librarians and publishers and funders, would recognise that the situation is too complex right now, because we are in a period of transition. Lots of things are changing, policies are shifting at journal level and at a funder level and at publisher level, and everyone is working together to move towards a more simple, sustainable future. But at the moment, it is a complex landscape for authors to navigate. And so I'm just going to take you through a few questions that you might ask yourself when you look at your research and think about whether you should publish in open access in this current moment. The first question you should ask yourself is what is the policy of the journal that you're intending to publish in? Publishers have been doing a lot of work in recent years and will continue to do work to introduce more high quality open access publishing opportunities for their authors. They're launching brand new high quality open access journals. They're taking established journals, and wherever there's funding available, they're flipping them from traditional subscription models to open access models. Where there's less funding or where funding is less consistent, they're turning subscription journals into hybrid journals, which continue to behave in many ways like subscription journals, but allow individual authors to choose open access. They're developing and defining green open access policies that introduce new opportunities for authors to share their research and their work and their articles, particularly through posting to institutional and subject repositories. But there is a lot of change within the system. There's a lot of misalignment between journals and between funders and between institutions, and because there's a lot of change and there's a lot of variability. Even within a press like CUP, we publish roughly 400 journals, and they don't all follow the same open access policies because they're working in different disciplines and in different contexts. And so it's very important to look at your individual journal's policy. One of the best places to start there, I think, is to go to a site called Sherpa Romeo, and I've included a link here in the presentation. To my knowledge, it's one of the best databases, most comprehensive, most up-to-date of open access policies at journal level. You can go there, you can type in the name of your journal, and it will come up and tell you a little bit about their OA policy. The next question you might want to ask yourself is who funds my research, who funds my lab, who funds my institution? Because if you are a grant recipient in one way or another, you are almost certainly subject to an open access policy from that funding body. Funding bodies have increasingly been introducing policies, and they vary significantly. Some encourage open access, some mandate, require their fundees to publish open access. Some encourage fundees down the green open access route, depositing their manuscript in an institutional repository, whereas others encourage them down a gold open access route, so publishing fully open through the publisher, usually for a fee and under a Creative Commons license, as Fiona was talking about. And also different funders apply different additional riders to these agreements that relate to the compliance of journals for authors to publish in, such as a journal's ethical policy, its peer review policy, the way that it deals with data, and such like. There is a great deal of variety, and again, it is very much worth your while looking up what your funder's policy is and getting into the detail of that. And there is a handy sister site to Sherpa Romeo called Sherpa Juliet. Again, there's a link in the bottom right corner of the slide here, where you can type in your funder, and that will give you some good information about your funder policy as a starting point. Though, of course, you should talk directly to your funder. It's difficult to talk about funding policies without talking about Plan S. Plan S is arguably the most conspicuous version of funder policy that's out there at the moment. It's emerged in the last 18 months. And it's conspicuous, it's prominent because, firstly, it represents an alignment of a number of significant funders, particularly national funders in Europe, the European Research Council, the World Health Organization, the World Bank, and also a couple of prominent private funders, the Wellcome Trust here in the UK and the Gates Foundation in the US. It's prominent in that body of that coalition represents a significant amount of research investment. And they are aligned, they are pursuing the same policy across borders, which is really the first time that we've seen funders do that in an effective way. They're also prominent because this is a particularly robust set of principles designed very much to quickly accelerate the transition towards open access, and in fact push for a complete transition of the scholarly communication ecosystem towards open access. If we just cycle on the slide, you can see here the people who are involved. And if we cycle on again, they're intending to achieve this through the robust application of mandates to their funders that affect where they can publish. And there's a description here on the screen. I will run out of time if I try and go into any more detail, and I could talk for days about Plan S, and we'll be happy to answer any questions at the end. But it's really here as an illustration of the scale and the ambition of funder policies around open access, the number of authors, illustrative of the number of authors that may be affected, and the timescales involved. There's an expectation that this will come into effect from 2021. The final thing that you might want to consider is your institution. What is your institution's open access policy? Do you have funding available to you through your institution to publish open access? And critically, does your institution have an agreement with the publisher of the journal that you're intending to publish in? Libraries and publishers have been working together for a number of years to try and centralize the funding structures for open access and make it simpler for authors to make the decision to go open, and also to make that funding available to a broader range of people. And one of the most prominent ways that we're doing that is through an evolution of the subscription model. So whereas for many years publishers have formed agreements with libraries that have allowed the patrons of those libraries access to read our journals, we're now signing agreements that allow those patrons not only to read, but also to publish open access in those journals without paying an additional fee, because all of that is packaged together within the subscription. The idea of that is to make the decision much simpler for people at those institutions. You would know if you are at an institution that has a read and publish agreement with Cambridge, that regardless of your professional status, regardless of your funding background, regardless of your discipline, you are able to publish open access in the majority of Cambridge University Press journals. And the extension of that is that we expect over time, as we sign more of these deals, for more and more people to have access to this open access funding through institutions, and as a consequence for more and more of our content to go open. And ultimately, the goal is to get to a place where we can, all of our authors have access to open access funding in one way or another, whether that be through directly through their grant, or through an institutional read and publish agreement, or through a waiver scheme. And at the point at which we get to that goal is very much up for debate, and will depend upon the alignment of different stakeholders, will depend upon movements within the market, and uptake of read and publish. Plan S are certainly aiming to get to that point by 2025. And lots of people think it will take longer, but certainly that is the ultimate goal for CDP. This is where we've got to so far. These are the read and publish agreements that we have. So if you are in a country that is shaded dark on this diagram here, this chart, whatever you call it, then there's a good chance that you have the ability to publish open access in the majority of Cambridge University Press journals, and it would be worth exploring that in great detail. But for the moment, we are not there. There are a lot of patches on this map that are not shaded, and we're hoping to develop that and get further with RFP coverage, freedom published coverage. But for now, if you are not in one of those shaded boxes, firstly, check again later when you come to publish, because you might be by the time you come to publish. But if not, you also have the green open access option available to you. Anybody who is publishing in a Cambridge University Press journal has the right to deposit their accepted manuscript in an institutional repository on an open access basis, or in a subject repository on an open access basis, without embargo if you're publishing in a humanities and social science journal, with a 6-month embargo if you're publishing in the science, technology, medicine section. Other journals, other publishers have their own policies, and I would encourage you to consult them. Let me pass over to Helen at this stage.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. So I'm going to talk about the book side of our open access publishing, which we mainly apply just to monographs and some other kinds of books, but mainly monographs. And I'm going to just talk about some of the mutual benefits of publishing an open access monograph, as well as our book processing charge model, which is the book version of the article processing charge for journals, and then some of the challenges we're facing in implementing this and the solutions that we're thinking of. So first of all, so monographs are now a rapidly growing area of our open access publishing at Cambridge, with 66 titles now published in our open access programme as of this past January. And we see this as an enterprise which is mutually beneficial to all three of the main stakeholders, the author, the publisher and the institution. The benefits for our authors is that you get to meet the open access requirements of the institution or of the funder, and while still benefiting from the high quality service and prestige associated with publishing at Cambridge. For us as a publisher, as well as for the author, an open access publication has higher visibility than a traditionally published monograph, and then in turn a broader audience. And the benefit for the funder is that this increased visibility also raises their profile. So, in terms of our book processing charge and fee structure, we've tried to create a model which is fair in terms of the level of service we offer to our authors, and is also in line with what our competitors are charging. It also allows us to offset potential revenue losses we might make as a result of publishing on a gold open access basis. So we're currently charging £9,500 for a book of up to 120,000 words, and then £55 for each extra 1,000 words. We also publish a print version, which is available for purchase at the additional print price of the monograph. And the licenses we use, which my colleagues have spoken about earlier, do allow some flexibility as regards to sharing content, making it visible, while also protecting our authors' intellectual property, and that depends on, again, on funder requirements. So some of the challenges now that we're facing, we face a number of challenges in creating a business model that works for gold open access monograph publishing. So in these next few slides, I'm going to talk about some of these and the possible solutions we found. The first challenge involves making open access publishing sustainable while still maintaining the high quality and academic rigour that our publishing programme is known for, especially our very careful peer review process, which is known to be one of the most rigorous in the world. Our solution to this is that we are applying the same strict selection and review process to an open access monograph as we would to a conventionally published one. Just because we're collecting a processing fee so that we effectively have our revenue up front doesn't mean that we would publish something we wouldn't otherwise normally publish. So the second challenge that we're facing is that in order to make our open access publishing successful and to continue to make it a benefit to authors and funders, it has to be fully discoverable. And in turn, discoverability means that we can obtain useful usage statistics and we can see how widely used and influential our open access monographs are. So our solution to this challenge is to make sure that each monograph is clearly flagged as open access on Cambridge Core, which is our online books platform, books and journals platform, sorry, and then all the metadata on the title that goes out to third parties such as Amazon also clearly flags that this book is available open access. We also have partnerships with discoverability services such as OAPEN and the Directory of Open Access Books. They work with us to make our open access content more visible to the wider academic community. Our third challenge is around sales, specifically how we can make our publishing programme as a whole sustainable in the light of the growth of open access book publishing. Because we've only so far published 66 titles, it's difficult to see the longer term picture of how open access will affect print sales. So far, print sales are holding up, even for books that are available as gold open access, but this may change in the future as open access becomes more mandatory and the buying habits of libraries change. We already know that digital sales are completely diminished when a book is available open access, and digital sales of monographs, just like journal articles, represent a very significant proportion of our revenue. And on top of that, we still have the same overhead costs around the editorial production and marketing effort that goes into a gold open access monograph, as we do for a conventionally published one. So right now, our solution is to charge a book processing charge that will make back some of the losses or potential losses. We're also streamlining our in-house publishing process so as to make them more efficient and cost effective, especially in anticipation of an increased uptake of open access publishing, but without cutting corners. We've also been experimenting with some alternative funding models, such as crowdfunding. Another important solution is our Element series, which is also now available open access. This publishing program combines the best features of our journals and books, but we charge a slightly lower fee for the processing charge than we would for a full-length book. And finally, the fourth challenge we're facing is accessibility and how to make our open access book publishing equally accessible to everyone across the scholarly community. Not all scholars and institutions have equal access to funding for our processing charges. That could become a problem if, for example, open access becomes part of future REF requirements. Also, the cost of open access publishing might be greater for some subject areas than others. For example, in areas that require more illustrative materials. Some copyright holders don't give permission to use their materials under Creative Commons licenses. Also, we still publish a number of edited volumes where a chapter written by an individual author functions as an autonomous unit in terms of their research output, but it's complicated to make one chapter in the book open access because it would mean reducing the price of the overall digital product, so as to avoid double dipping. So some solutions to this: alternative funding models might become more the norm, and the requirements around third-party permissions and licensing may change. These are issues that we're still yet to fully work out the solutions for, but we will continue to keep an eye on them as the open access landscape continues to develop and evolve, and we will adapt our processes and policies accordingly. That is all from me.
So thank you very much to our speakers. We've had a number of questions coming in via the chat function, and we also had a few before as you were signing up for this webinar. So let's see how many we can get through in the next 10 minutes. A straightforward one, I hope, for Daniel, first of all. Somebody's asked, does academia.edu rank among the depositories where one could upload a green open access article published for the Cambridge Journal?
Okay, so for CUP, at least academia.edu and similar websites, platforms like ResearchGate do not count as eligible for deposit in the sense that they are commercial repositories. So we allow deposit in non-commercial institutional subject repositories, but not commercial platforms, and academia.edu is a commercial organisation. We do provide an alternative that supports sharing through sites like academia.edu. If you go to your, for the majority of journals, this is the case, if you go to your article page and you click the share link, from there you can download a PDF cover sheet, which provides within it a link to a freely accessible read-only version of your article. And it is permissible to upload that cover sheet, that PDF, to academia.edu.
Thank you. Andrew, I've got a question which I think probably is in the forefront of a lot of people's minds about affordability. The questioner says that fees payable by authors are a major barrier for academics in South Africa, where this questioner works, and could be insurmountable for students. What can we do about this?
Yeah, I think, excuse me, I think there are a couple of things to reiterate here that have been touched on by people in the presentations. We recognise that there are these regional inequalities in funding, and also subject-based inequalities across the funding. So that's why we're working on models to help institutions cover the cost of APCs for their researchers that are affiliated with their institutions. And Daniel talked about the read and publish model, which is the sort of the most popular of those at the moment. We have ambitious internal targets, convert as much of our university sales reach around the world to a read and publish model over the coming years, which again I think was referred to in the slides. So we see that as a major factor in making OA much more affordable and sort of democratizing the process. I think the other thing to say is that we have a very active waivers policy for our fully gold OA journals. We provide full waivers and discounts to authors who are in low and middle income countries, and that list of countries is based on a country list produced by Research for Life. We've got full information on this on our website, and we'll circulate the link to information about that after the session.
Yeah. Yes, we'll send around answers to all the questions, probably in summarised format in due course after this webinar. Fiona, a couple of people are concerned about predatory journals. How do people know that an open access journal is trustworthy?
I think there's two ways to check this. One is to go to DOAJ, which is the Directory of Open Access Journals. And this is a list of open access journals that they've looked at and decided that they're correct and that they should be worthy of an article or an author publishing in them. Another way to look at is Think, Check, Submit, which is an international cross-sector initiative from a number of different scholarly organisations such as COPE, DOAJ, OASPA, the STM Association, and it helps researchers identify trusted journals, and it takes them through a checklist to help researchers.
Thank you. Somewhat related to that, Daniel, somebody said, my colleagues say that open access journals are poor quality. Is it risky to submit a paper to one of them?
I think it very much depends upon which journal you're submitting to. Open access is a business model or a finance model for the journal rather than an indication of the quality of the journal itself. So there are very high quality open access journals and there are very poor quality journals, probably just as there are very high quality subscription journals and very poor quality subscription journals. So what you should consider is the reputation of that journal within the field. Look at the metrics that are relevant for your field. If impact factors are important for your field, then that's a good indication. But there are others that are particular to your discipline. But make the decision in the way that you would make a decision in any case, choosing your journal, kind of regardless of the model, I would suggest.
Going back to the funding question, but turning to monographs, somebody said, can I publish an open access monograph if I don't have funds to pay for it? Liz or Helen?
No, I guess. I mean, we at the moment we are charging the big processing charge, and we would.
Yeah, I suppose just to give Helen a break and just to say a little bit about that, as she explained in her presentation, the book processing charge isn't an additional fee that we're taking. It's not a profit for the press. It's intended to offset the print sales that we would have from a traditional monograph. So it's quite carefully calibrated at the moment, and it is open to to variation in future going forward. But it's not profit for the press. It's offsetting those print sales. So unfortunately, we aren't able to remain profitable and to continue as a university press without having some form of BPC. As Helen also mentioned, we are also experimenting with other models where if the funder doesn't have access to if the author doesn't have access to the funding for the BPC through their institution, through their funding body, we're looking at things like crowdfunding and other experimental models. But unfortunately, in order to publish, we do need some form of BPC, just like the APC, but on the journal side.
Thank you. Questions just come in. How reliable is Beale's list as a list of predatory journals, which perhaps I'll take and then others can chip in. As many of you probably know, Beale's list has been discontinued now. I think while a lot of people would think that Geoffrey Beale did a useful service in highlighting the dangers and risks of predatory journals, there's also a general view that his list was perhaps over-inclusive and include a number of journals that were not setting out to be predatory or to defraud or delude authors in any way. I think personally that there's no harm in looking at Beale's list, but then you should still absolutely use approaches such as the Think, Check, Submit list, or DOAJ, which takes a positive viewpoint about which journals are worthy of publishing in, rather than completely relying on Beale's list, not least because it is now out of date. Anybody else want to add to that? No? Okay, I think we've got a couple of minutes left, so I think here's more questions are pouring in actually. I don't know, well, we will have to summarize some of these later. Somebody said, here, let's go back to basics, and perhaps Fiona, you could take this one. How do I decide whether to submit to an open access or a non-open access journal?
As Daniel said before, open access versus non-open access is a business model. A journal should be, if you want to submit to a journal, it depends on what that journal is offering in terms of what your community wants or what you want as an author. So I very much think it's about which journal is appropriate to your needs in terms of your research. And then obviously you have to think about if it is a gold open access journal, if you can pay that fee through your institution or through an RMP deal, through a waiver. But the decision really shouldn't be on whether it's open access or not. It's whether the journal is appropriate for your needs.
Okay, and maybe one final question, Daniel. Is it easier to get accepted by an open access journal than a subscription journal?
No, well, no, it shouldn't be, and certainly in the case of CEP journals, that's not the case. So the open access question is completely, again, we see it as a business model in many respects, and the idea is that it doesn't impact upon the editorial office tools. The editorial process is exactly the same. For a hybrid journal that is publishing both OA and non-OA journals, the editorial process is exactly the same. The editor is completely independent from the process, and so the decision making is completely unrelated to whether the journal is open or not. There are, of course, other journals in the world, and there are open access journals that are easy to get into, and that those are journals that are more likely to fall into that predatory category that are simply seeking to develop scale and commercial revenues rather than publishing quality. So, as always, it's a question of just choosing the journal which is relevant for you and that has a standing and a reputation in your field.
Thanks. So I think we're just about out of time. I mean, there's some really excellent questions coming in, particularly around funding of open access. So we will try and draft some answers to those we didn't manage to get to now and send these round with the slides in due course. So can I thank the panelists and the others who joined to respond to the questions, speakers, thanks very much. And thanks to you all for listening.
Thank you. Bye.